Friday. Welcome back to another Free Friday training. And today we are continuing our conversation of nutrition. If this is your first time joining us today, I want to just say thank you. Welcome every week, Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We have these Free Friday trainings, and it's really to become a part of this amazing community of people that are just looking to live a life of freedom through health in a smart, simple, and sustainable way. So for the past couple of weeks, we've been talking about nutrition, really breaking down concepts to help you simplify what method or different methods that you can bring into your nutrition lifestyle. Because look, health is the goal here. That is what we're chasing after. So last couple of weeks, we've been talking specifically about reverse diet. And if you missed any of the trainings, I suggest you go back into my YouTube channel, click on the Free Friday trainings section, and go through those videos so you can really understand what we're breaking on today. We're not gonna summarize, we're not gonna give any recaps, just simply go check those videos out so you can just be up to date with what we're talking about. We are looking at reverse dieting, and this is specifically for those that either have been on a low calorie deficit for a long period of time and their metabolism has slowed down. They've either been dieting for a long period of time, again, going through any method that is restrictive, meaning in the calorie intake that you have. Those that have been on that for a long period of time, again, are dealing with or are facing with maybe their body not responding the way they'd like it to. Maybe they feel like they're a bit stuck or their metabolism is just slow, their energy is a bit down, and we want to pick it up again, right? So this is specifically for those types of people, or if you're really looking at wanting to lean down, maybe you're preparing for a competition, maybe you're preparing for some type of bodybuilding show, and you want to lean down so you don't lose as much muscle mass, but be able to burn excess fat and things like that. This is also a good method for you. So this is called reverse dieting. If you don't know of it, you can feel free to check it out and do your own due diligence, which I highly recommend, because again, it is about exploring. We're exploring with this process to see if your body will respond to it. There is no specific science, there is no guarantee in a specific method, but what we can do is explore and see how our body responds, see how our body feels, because it's all really, it comes down to trial and error. I'll be honest with you. My whole years of being in the health industry, my entire journey has been trial and error, because there's different things that happen in our body. Again, we talked about how that adaptation, your body goes through an adaptability stage where it starts to figure out what's happening. And we want to always kind of keep things moving so that we never hit a certain standstill. So 5 steps, we're going to jump right into them. Last week, we spoke about the first two, and I will just recap on these first two to make sure that you did your homework. One is to choose your tracking method. If you don't know what that is, go check that out. There are 2 options. You can do a calorie or macro tracking, and then you can also do hand portion tracking. We reviewed that. I'm not going to spend too much time with that. Number 2, the second step would be to determine your maintenance calories. This was huge because as we now start to make some adjustments, we want to figure out where is my body at its maintenance state, meaning I don't go up, I don't go down, I kind of just stay stagnant in this weight. And that's not a bad thing, because remember, when we're looking at the phases that we might go through in our journey, maybe you're looking to release weight. Well, there's going to come a time where you've hit your goal and you want to maintain. Well, it's important to know this information. Obviously, we want to identify that for you right now, but also keeping in mind moving forward as you continue to get closer to your end goal result. And really, when we're talking about a number specifically, right? Because we never get to an end goal in health. It is forever. It's a life. It is something that is a part of us till the day ends, right? When we're no longer here. So it's important to look at this, because that's going to really help us to gauge, okay, how much am I going to be increasing, right? So now we're going to jump into step 3, step 4, and step 5. And here It's step 3 is deciding on your macronutrient balance. So what is that? We have macronutrients. What are macronutrients? Proteins, carbohydrates, vegetables, fiber, and essential fats. Okay, which really is just 3: protein, carbohydrates, because fiber falls into a carbohydrate. There's simple carbs, and then there's complex carbs. The simple carbs is most things that are processed, most things that turn into sugar really fast. To give it a name, it would be high glycemic carbs. Those are simple. The reason they're simple is because they don't have much nutrition density. They don't have much nutrients. So it's simple. Your body literally just turns it into sugar quick. Your complex carb, which in there falls vegetables, fiber, right? And any source of carbohydrate that does turn into sugar, but have also a substance of fiber. This would be sweet potato. This would be brown rice. This would be couscous. This would be fruits. Fruits is a amazing complex carb that gives us a good source of energy because it is sugar, but it also allows that energy to be sustained through through a prolonged period of time in your body because of the fiber. So your body doesn't necessarily turn it into sugar quickly. Now, there are some fruits that are high glycemic. They don't have much fiber and they do turn really quickly into sugar. Pineapple being one of those, primarily your tropical fruits, but we're not going to spend too much time on that. That we can leave for another topic to really break down the difference between high and low glycemic carbs. Now, what we want to do is determine what that macronutrient balance is. Now, there are a lot of valuable tools out there for you that will help you determine, okay, what would be a good macro balance for me? And typically, what we want to shoot for is when we are in a state of either releasing weight, building weight, wanting to maintain good quality protein or develop lean or good quality protein, it would be ensuring that we have a higher amount of protein in our nutrition life. Okay. And this is key. And this is one of the key components that we're really going to talk about today, because when we're looking at these macro breakdowns or these macronutrient balances, meaning the balance between how much protein, how much carbohydrates, and how much fat should I be consuming, we can get very technical, but we're not going to do that. I want to really simplify this for you because it's really about keeping it simple. Because whatever is simple, I found that can become sustainable. Okay. So, yes, if you want to really get into the science of it and really, really get uh, technical with this, there are a lot of information out there that you can look into in terms of macronutrients, how to calculate all that stuff. But today, all we're really going to focus on is the protein because many people lack protein in their nutrition. And protein is important. Why? Because it helps us to stay full. Not only that, but it helps build muscle. Okay. And when we're talking about muscle, the only thing truly that will build muscle is protein. Okay. Because that is what our body, that's what protein needs to build more protein. And in that are amino acids, which is the fuel and the drive and the chemical compounds that shape protein. But so when we're looking at it, we want to make sure that when we are creating our nutrition lifestyle, we want to ensure that we're getting good amounts of protein in our body. And so we're going to break this down, excuse me, so that you can kind of explore and gauge, well, how much protein should I be consuming? There are a lot of myths that say you should be consuming 1 ounce per body weight. And today I want to share insight with you that is really going to demystify that in a sense, because we really don't need to consume way too much protein either. There's opposite spectrums. There's those that are consuming way too much that your body really cannot absorb, it cannot utilize, which ends up putting too much work on your liver. It puts too much strain on your body. It can cause constipation. It can really do a number on your digestive system. So we don't want to go that extreme. And we don't want to go on the other extreme of not consuming too much, too little, because we also need it to help us build a strong body. But more importantly, to help us build build muscle so that we can then also use more energy. Okay. When we're talking about protein in building muscle, muscle is important to have. Why? Because it demands more energy. So that's a good thing, which means that my energy out is going to increase because now I'm burning more. I'm using more. My body is using more energy because it has more muscle, which is why, my friends, building muscle should be your number one priority when we're talking about health and exercise. Cardiovascular is important. We must have a good heart. We must have good lungs. We must have good stamina in terms of just I'm having trouble with this word. Oxygen, oxygenate, oxygenation. There we go. That's the tongue twister. Say that 10 times. Oxygenate. What? Oxygen, 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 oxygenation. There we go. You know what I mean. It helps to produce more oxygen in our body, right? It's necessary. But building muscle is important because when we're looking at releasing weight, we're looking at being leaner, we're looking at just being stronger and having a certain physique or a certain look, our body uses more energy with muscle. Okay. So a higher protein will maximize muscle protein synthesis. We've touched on that already in the past. Minimizing protein breakdown. So that is another reason why we want to have higher sources of protein in our day-to-day nutritional consumption. It helps maximize protein synthesis. It minimizes the breakdown of protein, and it also leads to more muscle gain. Okay, I recently saw a bodybuilder that I followed for many years, and he did a really cool breakdown of why protein is the only thing that builds muscle. And it's important to know that because when we have a low consumption of protein and we're working out, whether we're using resistant bands or weight, and we're killing ourselves in that training method and we're not seeing results, well, we may want to look at how much protein we're consuming, which is why I'm really going to take quite a bit of time breaking this down for you guys today. More protein also increases energy out because your body uses more energy to process protein than it does for carbohydrates and fat. It's more dense. So when it's more dense, your body needs more energy to break that down. In the same sense that fiber is also important, and it does the same. It works similarly, not as much as protein does, because protein is much more dense than fiber, but together it does make for more energy consumption of the body, right? So let's look at what are recommended amounts when we're looking at these macronutrient balances. What is a recommended amount of intake of protein? Okay. And we're going to give a range because everyone is different. And it also is going to mean, how do you feel? We don't spend enough time listening to our body or checking in with our body. So what we want to do is when we're exploring these, we also want to check in with our body. How do I feel? Am I tired? Am I weak? And really the weakness is the one thing we want to look at. Do I have more energy? Am I strong? Do I feel strong? If we don't feel strong, then protein might be something we may want to increase. So when we're looking, we're going to break it down for women and we're going to break it down for men. I'm going to use the system of pounds, being that we're in America, and then I'll go into the kilograms for those that might be listening to us that are outside of the States. So for women, the recommended amount of protein intake would be 0.6 to 1.35 grams per pound of weight, per body pound. So if you weigh 200 pounds, 150 pounds, I'm just going to keep it very simple, just using a round number. If you weigh 200 pounds, okay, we want to look at the range. We're going to multiply that times 0.6 grams, 0.6 of a gram. That would give us 120 grams. Now, there's a really cool little calculator, and you can Google this. It's a converter that will convert grams to pounds, okay? And it will also convert it to ounces. So roughly 100 grams is 3.5 ounces, okay? So that would mean that on the lower scale, if it's 120 grams, well, we can roughly look at it being about 4 ounces of protein per day, okay? So that's 4 ounces on the lower end. And then on the higher end, we would be looking at, if the scale is 1.35, right, grams per pounds, well, then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to get 200 pounds times 1.35. That gives me 270 grams. We come back to our nifty little converter, and that would equal, if 100 grams is 3.5, 200 would be 7. So we're roughly between 7.5 to about 8 ounces of protein per day. Okay? So that's a good amount of protein. So when we're looking at the number of meals that we're consuming, if we're breaking that down into 3 meals, well, we would take 8 ounces, divide that by 3. If you're doing 3 meals, so 8 divided by 3, that would give you about 2.5 ounces per meal, rounded up, 3 ounces per meal for 3 meals. If we're doing more meals, then we would divide that accordingly, right? So we want to make sure that this is something that we're paying attention to, because protein, again, is important. So for those that are looking to maintain lean mass or to just build more lean muscle, well, we want to stay a little bit higher on these ranges, right? Which would mean if I'm looking to build muscle, keep my levels of fat down, again, consuming higher levels of protein is what we want to aim for, okay? And again, this can vary also based on your energy, your activity level, okay? Which would mean that it is, I'm not sure if there was a question there. Could you check that, please? So that means that we're looking at just staying on that higher intake of protein per meal, okay? Now let's look at men. This is for women. Again, is there a question?
Is grams of protein the same as grams in weight? In other words, are we talking about the weight of a piece of meat and grams of protein?
I don't quite understand the question. Say it again.
So when you're talking about how many grams of protein,
Uh-huh.
the meat weigh, grams, something the same as grams in weight.
Okay, let me see if if I can answer it properly. So when we're looking at this scale, it's 0.6 grams of meat, of protein, right, per body weight. We're going to calculate that. So you're going to get your weight times the amount of grams here that is recommended for us to consume. And then from there, all we do is it's converted to ounces, and that is the ounce amount that we're looking at. And ideally, we want to look at raw weight. If you really want to get specific, we want to look at the raw weight of that. So if we're looking at consuming 8 ounces of that per day, well, you want to, if you're going to be weighing that out, you want to typically weigh it out raw. Now, what is the difference there between raw and cooked? Well, it's gonna come down about half an ounce or so. So don't get too worried about that. If you cook it and then weigh it, that's fine. Just make sure that we're staying with kind of within that range. Okay. If you want to be specific on the weight on the cooked one, well, we want to just stay within again the 7 to 8 ounces of weight per food, per protein. I hope that answered that question. Now let's look at for men. We have 1.4 to 3.3. I'm sorry, that was for kilograms. Yeah.
Is the grams of protein the same as the weight of the
Yes. Yes. Grams meaning in weight. Yes, that's right. But remember, the calculation here that we're doing is we're just determining the grams of the protein per your body weight, and then you can either keep it in grams if you just want to focus on that, not even worry it, convert it to ounces, you can do that. I'm just giving you the conversion based on because in the States we don't typically use grams, but if it's easier, you have a scale that does grams, well, it would be 270 grams. Honestly, that's kind of the safer route to go because it's going to be a bit more accurate. You don't have to worry about converting because the conversion of 100 grams is 3.5270 ounces. Now, some people might freak out and say, oh my gosh, what is that? Well, just round it up. If it's a higher number, round it down. But then that might still screw with people's thoughts on that. So we keep it to 3.5. But if we want to, just keep it simple and use the grams equation. Okay. So whatever we're multiplying it times your body weight, that number that it gives us is the amount of grams you want to consume per day. Okay. Now, for those that use kilograms, the range for you there would be 1.3. This is back to women. I jumped ahead. Women would be 1.3 grams to 3 grams per kilo of your weight. Okay, per kilogram that you weigh. Okay, so you can go in there, do the calculations if you prefer the metric system. I'm sorry, not the, what is that? What is that called? The, no, the kilograms and grams. The metric system. That's what I thought. So if you use that metric system, just go ahead and calculate that 1.3 to 3 grams per kilogram of your weight. Okay. Now let's look at men. Men looking at grams per pound of your weight would be 0.65 to 1.5 grams. You see, there's not much difference. For those that say, oh my gosh, men need to consume way more protein than women, not really. Actually, women need to consume a higher intake to be closer to what men consume because protein is important, my friend. It's important. It's important to keep us strong based on what we've been talking about today, right? It's important. And you're gonna notice that if you start to increase some more of your protein intake per day, you're gonna be a bit fuller. You're not gonna be as hungry. You're not gonna be craving certain foods as much as you used to. So for men, 0.65 to 1.5 grams per pound. Again, you're going to multiply that times your body weight. Again, if you weigh 200 pounds, 200 pounds times the 0.65, that gives you 130 grams of protein, meat, chicken, plant based protein, whatever it is you're aiming towards. Your preference would be the lowest you want to go to, and then 1.5 times 200 would be 300 grams of protein. Again, you want to convert that to ounces, find yourself a converter and just put in this amount of grams and allow it to break down in ounces for you. Okay. So as for carbohydrates and fats, the balance between the two isn't so important, honestly. Okay. Because when we're looking at releasing weight or gaining muscle, the reasonable mix, it's okay as long as it's sustainable for you. And this is where the simplicity factor really comes in for everyone. Because for years, I used to tell people how much of everything they should consume. And what I realized was that some people didn't like certain types of carbohydrates. Some people like a bit more essential fat. Some people like a bit more of a specific type of carbohydrate. So what we want to look at is really understand yourself. What do you prefer to eat? Now, we're here focusing on complex carbohydrates. We're removing simple carbohydrates. We're removing processed foods. We're removing carbohydrates that have no nutritional value or that truly have nutritional value, things that turn into sugar quickly, things that just don't benefit us, because here the idea is the longevity of health. So removing that, we're not even taking that into account. So for those that are looking at, oh, well, I like to consume bread, I like to consume a lot of starches, I like to consume a lot of chips and sugar, whole other topic. We don't want to. We're eliminating completely. We're not looking at that. We're just looking at carbohydrates that are essential carbohydrates, complex carbohydrates that are going to give us the nutritional, sustainable energy, and it's going to give us good sources again of nutrients. Now, there's some that might say, well, I don't want to consume carbohydrates at all. Well, great. We can still stick to certain carbohydrates that again are a bit more fiber dense, like your vegetables. I remember years ago when I was um, starting really on the nutrition side of things. Remember, I had a conversation with a student at that time, and I was still new in really understanding the whole concept. I was very ignorant about a lot of these topics, and he was telling me I only like vegetables. And I told her, oh, well, you can't do that. You can't just eat vegetables and protein. You have to eat this other carbohydrate as well. And I was forcing her to eat essentially um, certain other types of carbohydrates that she really didn't like. So if you're the type of person that doesn't like heavier carbohydrates like rice, like sweet potato, like couscous, like quinoa, and all of these other carbohydrates, squash or yams, butternut squash, you don't need to eat them if you don't want to. Again, because when we're looking at the carbohydrate and the fat side of things, now we're talking about essential fats here. We're not talking about saturated fats. We're not talking about greasy types of fats that just have no nutritional value. We're talking about essential fats. We're talking about your avocados. We're talking about coconut oils. We're talking about olive oils. We're talking about almond butter. We're talking about nuts, peanut butter, even. Those are all good sources of fat. Okay. So it's your preference. Really asking the question here, what do you prefer to have? The ratio between carbohydrates and fats is based on how you like to eat and what you can imagine yourself doing long term. This is one, the simplicity piece and the sustainability piece here, my friend. Okay? What is your preference? And this is where now the fun part of this whole methodology, so to speak, if you call it that, and also the principles behind, well, how should I be eating? How should I be consuming? What should I be? Look, this is now the fun part because we can really craft it uniquely for you. And you know what the good thing is? That you have that liberty. You have that freedom. Essentially, I want to teach you to have that freedom because everyone is different, right? And we can really get technical if you want by breaking it down with the nutrition calculator and really get down to the exact amount. And like we talked about that macronutrient balance and what that is. But look, my friends, I really want to just give you a peace of mind and I want to remove some stress, frustration, anxiety, worry, complication, whatever it is you might be feeling when we're talking about nutrition. And bring it down to the simplicity of making sure I'm getting a adequate amount of protein and that the carbohydrates that I'm going to choose and the fats that I'm going to choose, I'm going to look at, well, how do I like to consume? And then what we want to do is stay within the caloric amount. And if you want to then calculate that, well, then we can break it down, the calculator, or use your hand. So we talked about complex carbs being about a cup handful. Your vegetables would be about a fistful. And then your essential fats would be about a thumbful, right? So this is where we can explore with that. If we're not doing complex carbs, the cup can, then we eliminate that and we essentially have more fiber. We can intake more fiber. We can do a hand and a half. We can do two handfuls. Listen, fiber is not a bad thing to consume, which is one thing I highly recommend. When we're eating and we're still hungry, get a little bit more protein and maybe a little bit more fiber. Stay away from more of the heavier complex carbs, like your starches, like your pastas, like your rices, um, like your, again, sweet potatoes. If you don't want so much of that, when you're serving yourself, we serve an adequate amount, which again would range anywhere between 2 to 4 ounces, 4 ounces for men, 2 ounces for women. If you want a number for those that want to have a gauge, it's about 2 ounces. Cup hand is about 2 ounces. And again, it's not about perfection. It's let me consume this, see how my body feels. It's really about listening to your body and removing that anxiety and the stress and enjoying what we're eating, enjoying and knowing that these foods that I'm giving my body are going to help my body respond in the way that I'd like it to respond. Help me get the nutrients that my body needs to thrive, to be explosive in all the things that I like to do, to be at my optimal in all the things that I want to do. That's it. And so that now leads me to just keeping an eye on your portion control, food portion. And this is one thing why I recommend really leaning towards with our hand measurement. The hand measurement. This is something I believe in. This is something that I use. This is something that I emphasize for my students. But it comes back to being disciplined, about really looking at when I'm doing these things, I'm going to pay attention to them, right? So we can essentially skip weighing food as long as we're kind of tracking. Let's keep a log. I had a recent conversation with somebody I knew that we had been coaching for a long time, and he's like, you know what? I went back to keeping a log for myself because it's helping me to keep on track and knowing what I'm consuming. That's great. I remember many phases throughout my journey, I would literally track everything. That was actually one exercise, now that I think about when I was going to culinary school for a nutrition class that we took, we had to record what we consumed, I think for an entire month or for an entire week. And it was really cool to see at the end of the day, at the end of the week, wow, look at all this food that I consumed, or oh my goodness, yeah, that was one thing I shouldn't have consumed, or I consumed too much of it. So, what is this going to do? This is going to help you be intentional about your choices. So, it's as simple as getting, get practical here with you all, about just getting a notebook, right? And on that notebook, just breaking it down day to day, week to week, weekly, writing it down. Because then when you're tracking it, well, we're looking at staying on track. And staying on track is staying in line with who I am, with my identity. I am a healthy person. So therefore, if I'm a healthy person, well, these are the choices that this person makes. So now I'm knowing that I have to log it, to track it, to help me stay on track. That is why tracking is helpful. There are many applications too that you can use with your phone, right? There is a bunch of macro tracking apps that you can use if you're going to be tracking your calories and your macronutrients. You can put them in there, right? And many of them give you suggestions. If you want to utilize them, good. I find that many of those tracking apps may not necessarily be precise. Not only precise, but they might give suggestions that might not be in line with your ultimate goal. Okay. So doing it the way we're doing here, if we can at least start with the protein amount, then we can kind of get the other two. If they suggest it, then you can kind of play with it based on the calorie amount that we're going to be consuming, right? That's why that maintenance is so important. And now we're going to go into step 4, and this will probably be all we have time for today. And then we'll touch on step 5 next week and really close with some helpful recommended tips for you all. So number 4, step 4 is choosing your rate of progression. Okay. So it really comes down to your goal. What are you looking to achieve? What is the concept here that we're aiming for? What is the intentional goal that we're looking to obtain? Right? What you hope to achieve using this method. And based on that, it's going to determine how many calories you add each time you increase your intake. So having that idea of what that goal is going to be, well, then it's going to help us really to break down and know how much we're going to increase in the intake consumption that you do, okay? And then it's going to also determine how often you add calories. And this is going to be determined upon your metrics, the system that you're using to track. But we'll get on that in step 5, okay? We'll get into that next week. And it's also helpful to consider how motivated you are to eat more food, as well as much as well as how much fat you're willing to gain. Because again, for those that believe that I can utilize this method to simply eat more, believing that it's going to just help me to release weight, that's not exactly true. We touched on that already. So we want to look at, okay, if that's the case, well, how motivated am I to eat more food? And how willing am I to gain fat? If I'm okay with eating a bit more, but I don't want to gain fat, then that's going to be the key here. How much we intake and how often we increase that intake. Okay. Depending on your situation and preferences, you're going to really look at one of these 3 approaches that I'm going to describe to you here. Okay. So let's look at, if your goal is to increase maintenance calories after dieting or before dieting again, meaning you want to increase where you maintain at, okay? The weight that you maintain at, well, the desire to eat more is going to be low to moderate. Your desire might not be, you don't probably want to eat that much. Why? Because if we consume more, well, what is that going to do? It's going to take you out of the goal, which is to increase maintenance calories slightly, right? And now let's look at what that fat gain tolerance is. Well, it should be low. We don't want to gain fat. So then what is your starting intake? Well, let's look at this. It should be at your current maintenance calories or up to 10% above that. So if your maintenance calories were 1500, well, 10% of that is going to be 150 calories. So you're going to want to stay between 150, 1500 calories and 1650 calories. Again, if we're looking to increase the maintenance, I want to increase where I'm maintaining my calories at, either after dieting or before dieting again. So the increased daily intake should be about 40 to 60 calories per day. You see how we're starting low? 40 to 60. The error that many people would do is if we're looking at this maintenance of 150 calories, well, they would hit it right from the beginning. They would jump into 150 calories right off the bat. What we want to do is, my friends, we want to go slowly with this, right? 40 to 60, 40 to 60. And if you look at the threshold, is really less than what the maintenance calorie, really the goal here is to intake, because we're really not consuming that 10% above. We're staying with it, right? So increased daily should be about 40 to 60, or we're going to be looking at an extra half cup handful of carbs or an extra half thumb of fat. So your average weekly gain should be under 0.5 of a pound, should remain under a half a pound, basically. So you see how now we're gaining slowly to increase that maintenance. Okay. Now let's look at the next goal here. Now this here, my friends, is also when we're looking at increasing maintenance, it's going to also be for those that are looking to activate their metabolism again. Because what we're doing here is, this is for many after dieting, right? Or after many that have consumed or been on a low calorie deficit. So we want to activate the body again, which is we're going to eat fewer or eat a little bit more, but that fat tolerance is low. So for anyone that has been on a low calorie deficit for a long period of time, they've been dieting for a long period of time, this is where we're going to want to start, because then the gain on this is going to be significant to less. Now, the average weekly gain will be 0.5 or it will be backward. Okay, I should have clarified that at the beginning. So that means that either we're going to increase or we're going to decrease on the poundage, body weight wise. Okay, because again, this is to activate. And based on where you're at is how we're going to start to see your body respond. Okay, so everyone that is stuck, they've been dieting, they've been at a place where things have not been moving, your body's not responding, this is where we want to start at, right here. So the increase is going to be 40 to 60 calories, no more than that, which is why that maintenance level is so important to know, okay? Now let's go on to the last two and then we'll end here. The goal, if your goal is to be at peak physical performance, well, the desire to eat more is going to be moderate. And then the fat gain tolerance is going to also be moderate. So your target increase here, the starting intake that you're going to do is current maintenance plus 10 to 20% more. Okay. So we're looking at your current maintenance, if that's 1,500, and we're looking at 10 to 20% of that, at max, the 20 is going to be 300 calories. So now we're going to be adding that in, and you want to be at 1,800. Versus the first one, it was the highest you ever want to go is going to be at maintenance or at max that 10%, right? But never anymore. Here is you want to be at that 10 to 20% every time, okay? So the increase is going to be on this is going to be 80 to 120 calories. See, that's really not much, my friends. 80 to 100, excuse me, 80 to 120. Oh, goodness. 80 to 120 calories extra daily. Or that would convert into 1 cup handful of carbs, or 1 thumb of fats, or half a portion of each. Okay. This is already keeping in mind the amount of protein that we're consuming, right? We've already determined that. And keeping the ratios that we've been talking about per hand, okay? That is ideal for you. And here the increase on this would be about 1 to 2 pounds. I'm sorry, 1 pound of gain. Again, this is to gain per week. But you see how it's just a little bit to help our body absorb all this, to really allow it to consume and use what we're looking at. So these would be those that are, again, looking at keeping a little bit more muscle mass on their body. Now let's look at the last one here. If the goal is to recover from very low body fat levels, let's say you're coming off of a competition, you're very, very lean, too lean, and you want to just increase a little bit of fat in your body, which is important. We don't want to ever be excessively too lean for a long period of time. Our body needs some fat, right? So the desire to eat more is going to be high, and then the fat gain tolerance is also going to be higher, okay? So your current intake, your starting intake is going to be current maintenance plus 20 to 30% more. So again, if it's 1,500, your max is going to be 450 calories plus a 1,500. So you're at close to 2,000, 1,950 calories. So how does that look? Well, your daily increase should be 140 to 180 calories, or more specifically, 1.5 cup handfuls of carbohydrates, or 1.5 thumbs of fat, or 1.5 combined portions of each. Okay. So 0.75 of both, combined it, that's 1.5. And then the average weekly gain here, again, this would be to gain, would be about 1.5 pounds. All right. So there we have step 3 and step 4. Just to recap really quickly, step 3 is deciding on your macronutrient balance, primarily here focusing on your protein intake. For women, we want to stay at 0.6 to 1.35 grams per body weight. You get that number by multiplying your current body weight times these ratios, and it can be anything in between that, 0.6, 0.9, 1, 1.2, up to 1.35. So many, what they'll do is, if they're not even hitting the 0.6, then we have to do that immediately. We want to increase, well, let's go to half of that. right? So find that number between 0.6 and 1.35. Maybe start there. Or go to 1 gram per body weight, multiply that, and find out how many grams you should be consuming that day. Or if you want to convert that into ounces, convert that using a basic gram to pound ounce converter. For men, it would be 0.65 to 1.5 grams per body weight, same ratio. And then when we're looking at carbohydrates and fats, however you prefer to eat, staying within the ratios that we talked about, our hand measurements, making sure that we're at least within the calorie intake that we talked about that we should be in at our maintenance. Okay. Step 4 was to choose your rate of progression. And we talked about what those 3 are. Okay. All right, my friends. Well, that does it. Next week, we're going to be talking about step number 5, bringing it all together for you. We'll probably take a moment to recap it all just to refresh. And if you missed any of the last sessions, go back, start from the very first one where we break down the nutrition concept. And then from there, the next following sessions that we had. And then we will wrap up reverse dieting. And then we'll just lead into one last concept that I want to introduce that will help you kind of live a more flexible style of nutrition, similarly to what we were talking about today, but really just want to invite you to explore this process as we go into the next coming weeks. My friends, I love you. Thank you so much. Remember, let's share this. If you know of anyone, share the Free Friday training with them, invite them. Let's grow this community. I'm on a mission to help 1 million people live a life of freedom through health in a smart, simple, and sustainable way. And we can do that together. If you have any questions of what we talked about today, feel free to shoot me an email, david@davidhernandez.co, david@davidhernandez.co, and check out my podcast if you haven't already tuned in. If you're not following, find it on all your favorite podcast stations. Listen, you're not defeated. Listen, you're not defeated. And you can also find my YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and do that at YouTube under my handle at Dave K. Hernandez, at DAVEKHERNANDEZ. You can find me there. Follow so we can stay plugged in. My friends, thank you so much. And I will see you next week. Have a good one. Peace. Remember, you are incredible. Go out, crush it, and live your best life.